Hi, my name is Abby Buboltz, and I'm one of the registered dietitians here at Holy Family. Today we're going to talk about maintaining weight. So this is an area that for some of you, you may be at different stages of maintaining, or maybe you're still losing, but you want to start thinking about what do I do once I get to my goal. So when it comes to maintaining weight, there may be a couple different things to think about, and often this is a forgotten piece, but it's really an important piece. So say, for instance, you spend a year losing weight and you get to your goal weight. Ideally, you'd want to stay at that weight for the next decade, 2, maybe 3. And so when you think about the percentage of time that you're spending maintaining, it's actually pretty large, or at least that would be our goal, would be that that's the large portion. But sometimes we forget to plan for what we're going to do during that maintenance time. How do we actually maintain? Oftentimes we get to our goal and then we kind of maybe continue some of our habits, but maybe things change over time. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So when it comes to maintaining, the big key is having a plan. So using the term fail to plan, plan to fail, keeping that in mind as kind of the overarching theme today. What does a plan include? Usually it's going to include things like exercise, the specific food that you're eating, diets as in the term of what you're eating, not a traditional diet as we think of fad diets, having a support system, having the tools and resources you need, and making sure that that plan is specific to you. Now, none of these things are shocking or anything that we wouldn't expect to have as part of our plan, but all of these pieces are really important to have into place. Basically, we consider this setting ourselves up for success, and what it takes to set up you is going to be a little bit different than maybe your friend or family member. So when it comes to the plan, first of all, with exercise and the diet part of it, if you've been losing weight, you may have been focusing on one of these. Maybe you've been focusing more on exercise or more on the diet piece. And that's okay. And sometimes it's easier to focus on one area and then work on the other area in a way that makes sense for you and in a timeline that makes sense for you. But when you get to the maintenance stage, that may be a time to focus on the other area. So if you've been mostly losing weight through exercise, this might be a time to say, okay, let's maybe focus a little bit on the food part of it, or vice versa. We know that the 1-2 punch of both diet and exercise when it comes to long-term success in weight loss is really the combination of both. Although the diet plans or the types of diets that may help people lose weight can vary, there's many different kinds that work. We do know that having both a change in food habits and an increase in exercise, having both of those pieces in place is effective. The other thing is having a support system in place. We'll talk about that a little bit further. And we'll also talk today about tools and resources. What can you do? What can you have at your disposal to continue to make yourself successful? And then how do you vary it so that it works for you? So what does a maintenance plan look like? First of all, have you reached your goal? So really taking a look at the goals that you've set. If you've set a weight goal, you may have reached that goal, but maybe you're on the way there and it's a stopping point for you. You actually have found that your goal maybe is different, or maybe you've reached your goal, but you continued further on than that. So it's really important at this point, when you're getting near to maintenance, to reevaluate your goals. What do you want to do now? Where do you want to be? Do you want to lose 5 more pounds? Or are you 5 pounds away from your goal and this is actually a good spot for you? It really depends on where you're at as far as other things going on in your life. And maybe besides just that weight on the scale, maybe the labs that you've been trying to bring down, let's say, blood sugar. Maybe you've brought it into a good range, and maybe you're at a stopping point for the time being. So it's really reevaluating where are you at with goals, and do your goals need to be reset? Maybe you've reached your weight goal, but maybe you have another goal that ties into health. So when you reset the goals, it's really important to set specific goals. When we set goals that aren't specific enough, oftentimes this can be a challenging part of maintaining our weight loss or maintaining the changes that we've made. So when you set your goal, you want it to be specific. So get specific. That means oftentimes when I have someone set a goal, I keep asking questions. So, okay, you want to increase your veggies. And what kind of veggies do you want to increase? When do you want to increase them? What meal do you want to increase them at? Be specific. It's hard to do sometimes. We want to give ourselves a little bit of leeway, but if we're specific with our goals, oftentimes we're able to be more successful and feel more successful. You want those goals to be measurable. So if you set a goal, you should be able to look back and say, yes, I met that goal 50% of the time, or I met that goal the whole time. Maybe my goal is to have one more veggie each day. That is measurable. Want something to be achievable too. So set a goal that is something that's realistic, but at the same time, it does take consistency. We want our goals to be realistic, and we want our goals to be time-based. So give yourself a time frame. When we put goals out there that don't have a time frame on them, again, it gives us a little too much leeway, and oftentimes we keep pushing that deadline back and back and back. And when we do that, it allows us to slip up a little bit more. So when you're setting your goals, also ask yourself, where do you see yourself in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years? What do you see as your weight, as your health status? And then look at what has worked for you. So this is a question I ask quite a lot when someone is making changes to eating, exercise, health habits. What part of, when you've lost weight before or when you've made changes before, what has made you successful? Which portions of that plan or what you did were helpful for you? So when it comes to your motivation, what is your motivator? We're going to talk about motivation a little bit here. Accountability, what keeps you accountable, and what resources have been helpful for you in the past. So those are the 3 things we're going to talk about. And I want you to also think about what hasn't worked for you. So what parts were challenging, or what things just didn't work. They weren't helpful for you. And this is a part that's different for each person. Everyone has different pieces that work for them and different pieces that don't. So let's talk about our tools. So when it comes to motivation, sometimes the motivation that you had initially to make changes is different than now your current motivation. So for example, let's say you were trying to lose weight for a class reunion. That class reunion came and went. Maybe you met your goal, but then what happens after that? What's your motivation next? Most of us have motivation, but sometimes it takes a little bit of digging to really find out what is actually my reason for doing this. We can talk about some of the motivators, the benefits from eating healthy or making changes, lifestyle changes. And we know what these benefits are, but sometimes there's one that's more important than the others to us. And it's okay if that's something different than you maybe thought it was. But knowing what those motivators are for you and realizing that motivators change over time and they need to be reevaluated is really, really a key piece. So some of the benefits or some of the motivators may be things like weight control, less issues from a digestion standpoint. For some people, making food changes just allows them to feel better on a daily basis. Maybe your exercise, you feel like you're getting through your workouts better or you're recovering better from your workouts. Maybe your mood has improved. Sometimes it's just things like skin, nail, hair, or even things like your self-esteem is improved. Those can be some ways besides just the number on the scale. But maybe for some people, there's a family history of diabetes or heart disease, and you don't want to have that happen. So you're doing everything you can now to avoid that risk. For many people, family is a motivator. So you want to be around for your kids and your grandkids. Everyone's motivator is different. And so really, really figuring out what is your motivation. If you're not sure what your motivation is, ask yourself why. Why am I doing this? What would make me want to do this? And then if you're still having a hard time, weigh the alternative. What happens if you don't make a change? What happens if you keep eating the way you're eating, or keep a sedentary lifestyle? What does that look like? What happens if you don't make the change? So sometimes asking yourself weigh the alternative can also help frame it for you and start to help you find out what is my motivation. And remember, when you get to a maintenance stage, we've got to reevaluate the motivators. Remind yourself of your motivators. In the moment, when we want to have chocolate or ice cream or chips, we don't think about our motivators. So have those motivators somewhere where you can see them, whether it's a sticky note or a list in a cupboard. Sometimes even put a list of what your motivators are on the food that's a trigger for you. Maybe in your wallet, so it's with you. And then, again, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Another huge piece of maintaining the changes that we've made is the accountability piece. So when we don't have a check and balance for ourselves, oftentimes then some of those old habits may sneak back in, or we just become, a little bit more relaxed on the changes that we've made. So for example, if you normally have been portioning out your food and that has gone well and you've been able to lose weight doing that, what happens is sometimes we get confident in our abilities to estimate, and then we stop measuring one thing here or one thing there, and sometimes those portions creep back up. Now, this is just one example. You don't necessarily have to measure your food forever, but there are some pieces of accountability that are really, really important. So for example, let's say during your weight loss journey, you've weighed yourself once a week. Now, if you have maintained your weight, usually what I suggest is going to every 2 weeks. And if after those 2 weeks you've noticed your weight has gone up a little bit, then you've got to look at, okay, did something change? And usually that's a point where I'd say, okay, write everything down as specific as possible, start measuring foods, and what you might find is that just having that extra check can be helpful. So even once you've gotten to your weight goal, I usually suggest continuing to weigh yourself, but you can stretch it out a little bit and have it be every few weeks rather than once a week. Food journaling is a great accountability tool. And this is something you don't have to do forever, but it is something that you always have at your disposal. You can always jot down what you're eating. And this is something, especially if you notice that weight's coming back on or those blood sugars are increasing a little bit. This is something that you can get a good picture, what's going on. And oftentimes, if you do this, you're going to see where the holes might be. The other accountability piece is maybe having someone that knows what your goals are and that you can check in with regularly. And regularly doesn't mean necessarily every day or every week. Maybe it's every couple months. You have someone that you can check in with and just talk about, how is it going? Where are you at in your maintenance stage? And then the other thing is, for some people, having a group or having a team that's supportive can be helpful. So this can be helpful with the ups and downs because, as we know, there are going to be ups and downs. Expecting those is really helpful because if you expect that there's going to be good days and bad days and and times where it's easier to maintain your weight, and times where it's harder. If you expect that there's going to be ups and downs, oftentimes it's easier to handle. So go in with appropriate expectations too, that it's not always going to be easy to maintain your weight. The other piece then is having resources in place. So having those resources that maybe helped you at the beginning to help keep you on track. So maybe you've reached your weight loss goal. Maybe you've lost a significant amount of weight. You may need to reevaluate, what do I need on a daily basis? As our weight changes, our needs change as well. Maybe your activity level has changed. So we've got to take that into account too. So one place that you can go, if you're wondering how much should I have, besides asking a physician or a dietitian, the choosemyplate.gov gives you a good general guideline for how much you need in the way of calories, protein, that sort of thing. So you'd put in your age, your gender, your weight, your height, and then your physical activity level. And like I said, if that's changed for you since you've made changes, then this is something that you probably should do to see, okay, where am I at now? What do I need now? So what changes from an eating standpoint once you've gotten to your goal of maybe, you've reached your weight goal? Really, nothing changes other than the fact that your extra amount of calories, you've got a little bit more extra because now you're not trying to create a deficit. Now you're trying to maintain. So you've got a little more in the way of, if you want to have a treat or a glass of wine or something extra, again, within reason. Usually I say somewhere around 150 to 200 calories is that difference between weight loss and weight maintenance. When you're trying to, if you are counting calories or tracking your food, that's a general guideline. Everyone will be a little bit different with that, but oftentimes there is a little bit of leeway. Maybe it's just one extra snack a day, again, kind of going off of your hunger level. But generally speaking, we still want to keep those fruits and veggies high, 2 to 3 cups total per day of combined fruits and veggies. We want to have grains to be whole as much as possible. Dairy and somewhere between low fat, not necessarily fat-free. Oftentimes, as you know, the fat-free versions of things like yogurt have more sugar or more sodium. So low-fat versions of dairy foods, lean proteins, keeping the amount reasonable, and then keeping those healthy fats, things like oils, nuts, and seeds in place. If you need more information on fruits and veggies, this time of year, of course, is a great time to get in the habit of eating more fruits and veggies, as we have a lot more fresh produce options available. And with that, sometimes if you have questions on how to prepare something or store it or even how to select a good one, great place to go is www.fruitsandveggiesmorematters.org. So as you can see here, the screenshot shows that if you want to know how to select or prep a pomegranate, you actually can click on a little video and it shows you exactly how to do that. So that's helpful if you want to try new fruits and veggies, which sometimes when you are maintaining, you kind of get into a rut of what your normal foods are, and switching that up and trying new foods and new recipes can be a really helpful way to continue to make food exciting and fun while still eating healthy. So another key is to continue to keep a balance in your day. So eating every couple hours. This is often a change when people are losing weight that they make, is that they eat a little bit more frequently. Remember, when we go big amounts of time without eating, we're usually really hungry. And when we're really hungry, that's usually when our portions are too big and our choices of food are probably not always our best bets. Unless you're one of those rare people that says, when I'm really hungry, I crave a veggie. Usually it's something like sweets or chips or something carb heavy, or maybe something that we know we shouldn't have. So keeping a balance is really helpful. This is just a sample day of having a balance with both veggies and fruits and a variety of lean meats and proteins. So when you plan ahead when it comes to eating, we talk about planning ahead from a maintenance standpoint in general, but then specifically planning ahead from the nutrition standpoint. Again, don't wait till you're hungry to figure out what you're going to eat. That's when we usually don't make the best decisions, or we don't have the things that we would normally eat or the good for us foods on hand or readily available. So this key for planning ahead with nutrition is actually focusing on your challenge areas. So everyone has certain parts of the day or certain meals that are specifically a challenge for them. This is the thing that we've got to plan for. If we don't plan for our challenging days, that can sometimes spiral into a relapse of sorts where we kind of fall back into our old habits. So really focus on those areas that are a challenge. So having healthy snacks on hand to get you through parts of the day where maybe you aren't able to have a meal. Specifically planning out the nights of the week that are busy for you. So if there's certain days that you know are just very busy, those are the days that maybe you normally stop for fast food or have to do something more convenience-based. Those are the days to really plan out so that you can set yourself up for success. Plan the parts of the weekend as well, because oftentimes our weekends and our weekdays really are different. So having an on-the-go game plan. So a day that's not as structured oftentimes is more challenging for us. Making sure that you have a plan for those days is also really important. Don't forget about the weekends. Or if your weekdays are different, don't forget about those as well. Be productive in the kitchen when you are in the kitchen is a huge planning tip. Once we leave the kitchen for the night, oftentimes we don't go back to prep food. So when you're cooking supper, make sure you're prepping for the next day. While you're in there, be efficient. That is one of the hugest tools when it comes to prepping veggies, prepping fruits, having food for the next day on hand. So if you're trying to come up with some planning resources for planning meals, I've put a few recipe websites up here. Of course, there's a lot of places you can get websites with recipes, lots of different recipes out there. Usually, it's easier to just each grocery shopping cycle pick one new recipe. Oftentimes, if we do more than that, we end up with just a frustrating amount of extra ingredients that we may not always use. And it's hard to really then pinpoint what's working and what's not. So if you grocery shop once a week or you grocery shop once every 2 weeks, pick one recipe for that cycle that's new. And then you can say, yes, I'm going to keep this in my usual meal plan, or no, didn't work. So oftentimes, keep it simple. So a few of the challenges that we run into when it comes to maintenance are special events. So plan for these. Oftentimes, in the course of a week, if you have 21 meals in that week and you have one special event, that's 1 out of 21 meals. So it won't necessarily make or break anything, but it can turn into okay, I ate one meal that I shouldn't on the weekend. Well, now I'm just going to forget about the rest of the weekend and eat what I want. That's not necessarily going to help, because what happens is then again, we can fall into old habits. So just think about it as one meal out of 21 for the week. Make as best of decisions as you can, but still enjoy yourself. Remember that the little extras oftentimes can add up. So those little bites of candy here or there, sugary beverages that might work their way in, all those little extras over time they end up having a big impact. So a lot of times people will say, Abby, okay, I don't eat brownies every day, or I don't have soda every day. But if you have a brownie one day and a soda one day and a piece of candy the next day, all those things add up. So keep in mind that if you notice your weight starting to go back up, those little extras do make a difference. That's where food journaling comes into play. And then the last challenge is when you don't have any checks and balances in place. So make sure that you do have one of those accountability pieces to help you stay on track. And then the last thing is to stay positive. Again, know that there's ups and downs, but if you stick with it and are consistent with those small changes, you will be able to maintain. Thank you.